At 8:41 a.m., the CEO's nephew sat in my old office, staring at his locked computer while a $12 million client deadline counted down. He had my desk, my title, and my parking spot. What he didn't have was permission to access anything that mattered. They thought moving me out would make room for family. Instead, they handed a critical operations role to someone who could not even enter the systems behind it. By the time they understood why, the nephew was exposed, the CEO was cornered, and I had every decision documented. Every story here is about someone who got underestimated and made them regret it. For 9 years, I worked for a commercial insurance administration company called Westbridge Risk Partners. We handled claims processing, regulatory reporting, policy renewals, and data compliance for mid-sized employers. It was not exciting work. It was exact work. A claim record entered incorrectly could delay a payment. A missed reporting deadline could trigger penalties. A system permission assigned to the wrong person could expose thousands of private employee records. So while some people saw my job as managing software, I saw it as keeping the company from stepping on legal, financial, and operational landmines before anyone else noticed they were there. My title was Director of Systems Operations. I supervised a team of 12 analysts. I managed the access control process for 8 internal platforms. I led the conversion from a legacy claims database to a cloud-based system that cut processing errors by 34% in its first year. And I knew exactly who could access what. That part became important. Our CEO was Harold Voss. Harold had founded Westbridge 22 years earlier. He was charming with clients, polished with investors, and deeply convinced that any problem could be solved by putting the right person in a room with him for 30 minutes. He had one memorable habit. Whenever anyone gave him a technical explanation he did not understand, he would smile, tap the table twice with his index finger, and say, "Let's not confuse complexity with importance." It sounded wise. It usually meant he wanted the explanation to disappear. Harold trusted loyalty more than competence. And nobody benefited from that more than his nephew, Bryce. Bryce Voss was 27. He had worked at Westbridge for 8 months. Before that, he had been an account coordinator at a marketing agency for less than a year. He had never managed a systems team, never led an implementation, never handled a compliance audit, never been responsible for a single access control review. But he had one qualification Harold valued above all others. He was family. On a Thursday afternoon at 4:59 p.m., Harold called me into the executive conference room. Bryce was already there. So was human resources. That was never a good sign. Harold smiled and tapped the table twice. "We're making a strategic shift," he said. Then he told me Bryce would become Director of Systems Operations. My role, my team, my office, my title. He said I would be transitioned into a support capacity, while Bryce brought fresh leadership energy to the department. I looked at Bryce. He was trying to look serious, but his new company laptop was still in its box beside his chair. He had not even opened it. And in less than 24 hours, he was going to discover that taking my office was the easiest part of taking my job. I did not argue in that room. I asked one question: has Bryce completed the Systems Access certification? Harold waved it off and said, "That's an administrative detail." But the certification was not paperwork. It was the one thing standing between Bryce and the most sensitive client data in the company, and the deadline he was about to inherit had no patience for family connections. Harold announced the change to the department at 9 a.m. Friday. He sent a company-wide email with the subject line, "Building the Next Generation of Leadership." I was copied. Of course I was. The email praised Bryce's strategic instincts, his cross-functional perspective, and his ability to move quickly in a changing business environment. It did not mention that he had never used 3 of the 8 systems he was now responsible for. It did not mention that he lacked the required compliance certification. And it definitely did not mention that the department was in the middle of the largest client data migration Westbridge had attempted in 5 years. The client was a manufacturing group called Ridgewell Industries. Ridgewell had 11,400 employees across 6 states. Their contract was worth $12 million annually. They had signed with us after a previous administrator failed an audit and mishandled a benefits transition. That history mattered. Ridgewell did not tolerate vague answers. Their contract included strict data handling requirements, weekly status reporting, and a launch date set for the first business day of the following month. 21 days away. The migration was 87% complete. The final 13% was the difficult part. Historical claims, dependent records, eligibility exceptions, data elements that had to be reconciled manually because old systems rarely agree with new ones about anything important. My team had been preparing for the final cutover for 4 months. Bryce was inheriting it on Friday. At 9:17 a.m., he came to my office. He did not knock. He stood in the doorway, holding a coffee and looking around like he was evaluating a hotel room. "This is a good space," he said. "It is. Harold says you'll be moving to the second floor." "I've been told that." He looked at the wall behind my desk. It had a large process map on it. Nothing confidential. Just a visual workflow showing how requests moved from client intake to access review to implementation approval. Bryce pointed at it. "Can we get rid of that?" "It's the migration escalation map. It feels intense." "It is intense." He laughed like I had made a joke. Then he walked to my desk and set his coffee down beside a stack of Ridgewell audit documents. "I'll need a full status update by noon," he said. "You already have one," I said. "It was included in the transition packet." He glanced at the packet sitting unopened under his arm. "Right. But give me the simple version." The simple version. That was Bryce's favorite phrase during his first week. Every complicated issue had a simple version. Every risk had a high-level summary. Every detailed explanation was something he wanted reduced until it sounded manageable. I gave him the simple version. Ridgewell launches in 21 days. The migration is mostly complete. The remaining records require access to 4 systems, approval from compliance, and weekly reconciliation with the client's internal benefits team. You cannot sign off on final cutover until you complete certification. Bryce nodded quickly. "Okay, I can handle that." Then I added, "The certification takes 2 days. The next class starts Monday." He looked up. 2 days? Yes. Can't someone just give me access? No. Why not? Because you will have access to protected employee information. He frowned. "But I'm the director. That is why the requirement applies to you." He gave me a tight smile. "Let's not make this difficult." I had heard that sentence before. It almost always meant someone wanted a rule to stop existing because it was inconvenient. I kept my voice even. "I'm not making it difficult. I'm explaining the process." He left without saying goodbye. At 11:32 a.m., I received a system notification. Bryce had submitted an access request for the claims platform, the identity management platform, the client reporting dashboard, and the secure migration repository. 4 systems. All marked urgent. All requiring my approval because I was still listed as the authorized access control director until the transfer was formally completed. I reviewed the requests. His required training fields were blank. His background authorization was incomplete. His data handling acknowledgement had not been signed. I rejected all 4. Then I added a note. Access cannot be granted until required certification and authorization steps are complete. Enrollment details for Monday's session are attached. 5 minutes later, Harold called. He did not greet me. "Why did you block Bryce's access?" "I did not block it. I rejected incomplete requests." "Same thing." "No. One is a policy decision. One is a process requirement." He made it sound like he was trying not to lose patience. "Melissa, this transition has to work." "I agree." "Then help it work." "I am." I sent him the certification schedule. Harold tapped something on his desk. I could hear it through the phone. Twice. "Let's not confuse complexity with importance," he said. I almost smiled. Because the requirement he was dismissing had been created after a former department manager accidentally downloaded more than 4,000 employee records to an unsecured device. It was not complexity. It was what happened after the company learned a very expensive lesson. "Harold," I said, "this is not optional. If Bryce needs access, he can complete the certification. He's the new director." "Yes. And you're going to make him sit in a training class? I'm going to make sure the company follows its own access control policy. There was silence. Then he said, "We'll discuss this Monday." He hung up. That afternoon, Bryce sent an email to the team. Effective immediately, all systems requests should route through me. We need to eliminate unnecessary bottlenecks. He copied me. The team knew what that meant. He was calling me the bottleneck. My senior analyst, Priya, messaged me privately. Does he realize he cannot approve access yet? He will. At 3:46 p.m., Bryce received his first visible mistake. A Ridgewell analyst named Martin requested a secure extract of 860 employee eligibility records to validate the migration. Routine request. The extract had to be generated from the secure repository, validated against the legacy record set, encrypted, and delivered through the approved transfer portal. It usually took 2 hours if done correctly. Bryce replied to Martin in 12 minutes. Absolutely. We'll have that over shortly. Then he forwarded the request to Priya with one instruction. Please pull the data and email it to me. Priya did not do that. Instead, she replied, the data must be processed through the approved secure transfer workflow. Melissa can confirm. Bryce forwarded the email to me. Can you just tell Priya to stop overthinking? I read it twice. Then I replied to both of them. Priya is correct. Ridgewell employee records cannot be sent by standard email. The approved transfer workflow is required under the client agreement and our internal security policy. Bryce called me. You are making me look incompetent. No, I said. The request was incomplete. You could have handled it without correcting me in front of Priya. I did handle it. I explained the correct workflow. He lowered his voice. You need to understand that I'm in charge now. I understand that the role has changed. Then act like it. I looked through the glass wall of my office. Priya was at her desk, focused on her screen. The rest of the team was pretending not to listen, which meant they were hearing every word. Being in charge does not change the security requirement, I said. He hung up. At 5:18 p.m., Martin from Ridgewell emailed again, checking on the extract. We need it before Monday's reconciliation meeting. Bryce responded before anyone else could. Confirmed. It will be delivered by 8 a.m. He had not asked whether that was possible. He had not confirmed that the overnight validation queue had capacity. He had simply promised it. And that was his first real mistake. Because a promise to a client is not a motivational statement. It becomes a deadline. By 7:30 p.m., Priya had validated 412 records. The remaining 448 contained mismatched dependent information from Ridgewell's legacy system. That was not unusual, but it required a manual cross-check. The work could be finished by noon Monday, not 8 a.m. At 7:42 p.m., Priya sent Bryce an update. I was copied. Current status, 412 records validated. Remaining records require manual reconciliation. Earliest accurate delivery is 12 p.m. Monday. Please advise if you want an interim report sent to the client. Bryce did not answer. At 8:07 p.m., he wrote directly to Martin. Everything is on track. You will receive the complete file by 8 a.m. Then he copied Harold. I knew what he was doing. He wanted the CEO to see that he was responsive. He wanted to look decisive. But he had now made a written commitment that ignored the actual work. And Monday morning was about to make that impossible to hide. At 8:03 a.m. Monday, Martin emailed again. Please send the Ridgewell extract now. Our reconciliation team is waiting. Bryce had nothing to send. At 8:11 a.m., he messaged Priya. Where's the file? She replied, as noted Friday, the remaining records require manual validation. It is not ready. He called her. I could hear his voice through the hall. Not shouting, but loud enough. Why wasn't this escalated? Priya's reply was quiet. It was escalated. Friday at 7:42 p.m. Bryce stormed into my new workspace on the second floor. They had moved me into a windowless office beside the supply room. I had one chair for visitors and a filing cabinet that did not lock. He shut the door behind him. Fix this, he said. I looked up from my laptop. I can help you understand the status. No. Fix it. The records require validation. You know the system. Just make it happen. I folded my hands on the desk. Do you want the file quickly, or do you want it accurately? His face tightened. Both. Then it will be ready at noon. He stared at me. You're enjoying this. That was the strange thing about people like Bryce. When they cannot control the consequences of their own choices, they assume someone else must be enjoying their discomfort. I shook my head. No. I'm trying to prevent you from sending a client inaccurate employee data. He left. At 8:28 a.m., he sent Martin an email. Due to a temporary platform issue, delivery is delayed until noon. That was almost acceptable. Almost. But then Martin replied with something Bryce had not expected. Understood. Please include Melissa Hart on the noon review call. She has been our primary contact for the migration. Bryce forwarded the email to Harold. His message said, they're asking for Melissa again. This dependency needs to end. Harold replied, then end it. You are the director. That was the moment I realized they had learned nothing. They did not see the client asking for me as information. They saw it as defiance. They still believed that if Bryce occupied my office long enough, the account would forget who had actually built the relationship. They were wrong. At noon, I joined the Ridgewell call. Bryce spoke first. He used the word alignment 4 times in 3 minutes. He described the delay as a short-term data synchronization event. Martin let him finish. Then he asked Melissa what actually happened. The call went quiet. I did not embarrass Bryce. I did not mention the ignored Friday update. I said the remaining records contained dependent eligibility discrepancies. We stopped the delivery because accurate reconciliation is more important than meeting an unrealistic deadline. The final extract is now complete and has passed validation. Martin paused. Then he said, thank you. That is the explanation we needed. Bryce said nothing. But the question had been asked. Not by me. By the client. Why did they trust me more than the person now leading the department? That should have made Bryce curious. Instead, it made him angry. And anger made him make a much bigger mistake. 2 days later, Harold sent a calendar invitation for what he called a department alignment meeting. It included me, Bryce, Human Resources, and the Chief Operating Officer. The meeting lasted 18 minutes. Harold opened with a speech about leadership transitions. He said organizations could not grow if legacy gatekeepers held onto control. Then he looked at me. Melissa, we need you to stop undermining Bryce. I kept my expression neutral. Can you give me an example? The access requests. The client call. The way you correct him in front of staff. I thought about the rejected access requests. The unsigned authorization forms. The secure data process Bryce had tried to bypass. The client deadline he had created without checking the work. I have followed company policy and provided factual updates, I said. Harold tapped the table twice. Again, you're making this about process. It is about process. Bryce needs room to lead. He has room to lead. He does not have permission to bypass required controls. The CEO had been quiet until then. She asked, has Bryce completed the access certification? Harold looked at him. Bryce looked down. No, he said. The CEO asked, why not? Bryce shifted in his chair. I've been busy getting up to speed. The COO nodded slowly. Then she said, complete it by Friday. That was a small moment. But it was the first time someone above Harold had said the obvious part out loud. Bryce was not blocked. He was unprepared. If you've ever been underestimated at work, you already know where this is going. Subscribe, because the ending is better than you think. But Bryce did not complete the certification by Friday. He attended the first morning, then left after lunch. He told the training coordinator he had executive priorities. The coordinator documented his early departure. Then he tried to get an exception. He emailed the IT security manager directly. Please activate my full director permissions. The CEO is aware of the situation. The IT security manager did not approve it. She forwarded the message to compliance. Compliance forwarded it to legal. And legal asked why a newly appointed director was requesting privileged access without completing mandatory training. That was where the stakes changed. The access control process was not just an internal inconvenience anymore. It was becoming a record. A record that showed Bryce had been told what was required. A record that showed he had chosen not to do it. And a record that showed Harold had appointed him anyway. Meanwhile, Ridgewell's launch date was getting closer. 14 days. Then 13. Then 12. My team was still doing the work because they cared about the client and did not want their own names attached to a failed migration. But Bryce kept creating new problems. He changed the project reporting format without telling anyone. He canceled a weekly reconciliation call because it didn't need that many people. He asked an analyst to merge two validation queues to speed up delivery, which created duplicate records that took a full day to untangle. Every time someone explained the risk, he acted like they were resisting him personally. And every time he made a mistake, he asked me to repair it privately. Can you clean this up? Can you just take a look? Can you handle this one thing? I helped where company policy required me to help. But I stopped hiding the pattern. After each request, I sent a written summary. Per Bryce's request at 2:14 p.m., I corrected the duplicate validation issue caused by the queue merge. Per Bryce's request at 11:06 a.m., I restored the weekly reconciliation schedule. Per Bryce's request at 4:31 p.m., I confirmed that the client reporting dashboard cannot be modified without approval from compliance. No accusations. No emotion. Just facts with times attached. By the end of the second week, the team understood exactly what was happening. Bryce had the title. I had the knowledge. And Harold had built an entire leadership transition around pretending those were interchangeable. Then came the point of no return. It was a Thursday evening, 6 business days before Ridgewell's scheduled launch. At 6:26 p.m., the migration dashboard showed a serious discrepancy. The total number of active employee records in the new system was 11,362. The total in Ridgewell's validated legacy file was 11,400. 38 employees were missing. Not inactive. Not pending. Missing. That number happened to match the number of employees listed in a special eligibility category for employees returning from long-term leave. The data had not failed randomly. It had failed in a category that required manual review. Bryce saw the alert first. He came to my office with his laptop open. For once, he did not sound arrogant. Can you tell me what this means? He asked. I looked at the screen. Then I opened the migration documentation. The issue was fixable, but only if we began the manual review immediately and involved Ridgewell's benefits team before their office closed for the day. I looked at the clock. 6:31 p.m. We need to notify Ridgewell, I said. Bryce shook his head. Not yet. We have 38 missing employee records. I don't want to alarm them until we know more. We know enough. These records must be reviewed before launch. He paced in the narrow space between my desk and the filing cabinet. If we tell them now, they'll lose confidence. If we do not tell them now, they will find out later. He stopped pacing. What would you do? There it was. The question he should have asked 2 weeks earlier. The question he should have asked before he took over a department he did not understand. I answered him. I would notify the client, tell them exactly what we found, assign a joint review team tonight, and delay the final lock until every record is reconciled. He stared at the dashboard. Then he said, I need to talk to Harold. 5 minutes later, he was in Harold's office. I could hear pieces of the conversation through the hallway. 38 is not that many. Can't we just add them after launch? We cannot let the client panic. Then Harold said something I will never forget. Launch on time. We can repair the exceptions after we prove the system works. I closed my eyes for a moment, because that was not a technical decision. It was not a business decision. It was a decision to prioritize appearances over people whose benefits records were about to disappear from the new system. And the next morning, Harold was going to put that decision in writing. But what happened at 9 a.m. the next morning is the part nobody saw coming, and it started with a single email Harold never should have sent. He wanted to prove Bryce could lead without me. Instead, he authorized a launch while 38 employee records were missing, copied the client on a claim that was not true, and handed me the exact evidence that ended both of their careers at Westbridge. At 8:52 a.m. Friday, Harold sent an email to the Ridgewell executive team. He copied Bryce. He copied the CEO. He copied me. The subject line was Ridgewell Migration Confirmation. The message was short. Westbridge confirms that the migration is complete, validated, and ready for scheduled launch. Our team has completed all required reconciliation and is prepared to support a seamless transition. Complete. Validated. All required reconciliation. None of that was true. 38 employee records were still missing. The manual review had not started. Ridgewell had not been notified. And Bryce had not completed his systems access certification, meaning he could not even access the secure repository where the missing record review had to be performed. I read the email at 8:54 a.m. Then I checked the dashboard again. The alert was still active. 38 records. The same number. At 8:57 a.m., I replied to Harold, Bryce, the COO, legal, compliance, and the Ridgewell contacts. I did not write a speech. I wrote 4 sentences. Please note that the migration dashboard currently shows 38 active employee records requiring manual reconciliation. I have not approved final validation or confirmed readiness for launch. The records involve a leave status eligibility category and should be reviewed jointly with Ridgewell before any final certification is issued. I recommend that the scheduled launch be paused pending resolution. I sent it at 8:58 a.m. At 9:01 a.m., my phone rang. Harold. I answered. What are you doing? He asked. I am correcting the record. You just contradicted the CEO in front of the client. I clarified the status of the migration. You had no authority to send that email. I looked at the transition memo he had signed 2 weeks earlier. It said I remained responsible for data integrity controls until the migration was formally completed. I have authority over data integrity controls, I said. You are not the director anymore. I am still the designated validation owner. He went quiet. Then he said, withdraw the email. No. His voice sharpened. Melissa, this is an order. No, I said again. I will not withdraw an accurate statement about unresolved employee records. That was the moment he stopped pretending the transition was about leadership development. You have been trying to make Bryce fail since day one, he said. I almost felt sorry for him. Because the truth was so obvious and he still could not see it. Harold, I said, Bryce does not need my help to fail. He needs your help to stop making decisions he is not qualified to make. He hung up. At 9:07 a.m., Ridgewell's Vice President of Human Resources requested an emergency call. At 9:15 a.m., everyone was on it. Ridgewell's Benefits Director, their legal counsel, their IT lead, Westbridge's CEO, the COO, legal, compliance, Bryce, Harold, and me. The Ridgewell Vice President spoke first. Are there 38 employees missing from the migration file? No one answered. Then she asked again. Is that accurate? Harold started to speak. We have identified a limited reconciliation item. The COO interrupted him. Melissa, please answer. I had known the COO for years. She was careful, measured, not dramatic. But her voice had changed. She had read the emails. She knew exactly what had happened. Yes, I said. 38 active employee records require manual reconciliation before the migration can be certified. The Ridgewell Benefits Director asked, why did we receive an email 9 minutes ago stating all reconciliation was complete? That was the question. The one nobody in Westbridge wanted to answer. Harold said there was a misunderstanding in the timing of the status updates. The Ridgewell Legal Counsel spoke for the first time. Was the confirmation sent before the records were reconciled? Silence. Then Bryce tried. We believe the records could be corrected within the normal post-launch support period. The benefits director's voice went flat. These are active employees with benefits eligibility records. There is no normal post-launch period for missing employee records. Bryce looked at Harold. Harold did not look back. I could almost see the moment Bryce understood what had happened. He had thought he was being protected. He had thought his uncle's confidence meant he was safe. But Harold had not protected him. He had placed him in front of a problem he did not understand, told him to act like a leader, and expected someone else to absorb the consequences. The Ridgewell Vice President asked one final question. Who is actually accountable for data validation on this migration? The COO answered before anyone else could. Melissa Hart. That was it. Not a promotion announcement. Not a dramatic apology. Just the truth, spoken plainly in front of the one client everyone had been trying to impress. Ridgewell paused the launch. They gave us 48 hours to reconcile the records, provide a full incident report, and demonstrate that no other employee categories had been omitted. 48 hours. The contract was worth $12 million. The company had 2 days to prove it deserved to keep it. At 10:22 a.m., the COO called me into her office. Harold was not there. Bryce was not there. Just the COO, General Counsel, and the head of compliance. The COO shut the door. "Can you fix it?" she asked. I thought about my old office. My old team. The empty second-floor room. The way Harold had called me a gatekeeper because I refused to ignore policy. Then I thought about the 38 employees whose records had been treated like a public relations inconvenience. "Yes," I said. "But I need authority restored immediately." The COO nodded. "Done. I need Bryce removed from all migration decisions." "Done. I need Harold excluded from client communication until legal completes its review." The General Counsel looked at the COO. The COO nodded again. "Done." Then I added one final condition. Every major decision must be documented in writing. No verbal approvals. The General Counsel actually smiled. "You'll have that too." At 10:37 a.m., I sent the new internal authority notice. The team responded immediately. Not with celebration. With relief. Priya called me less than 5 minutes later. "Where do you want me?" "Secure repository review. Start with leave status eligibility." Another analyst took dependent records. Another took payroll feeds. I coordinated Ridgewell's benefits team. We worked through the night. At 1:14 a.m., we found the source. Bryce had approved a workflow change 3 days earlier. He had merged the leave status queue into a general exception queue because he wanted fewer red flags on the migration dashboard. The records had not disappeared by accident. They had been rerouted into a queue no one was monitoring. The data was there, but it had been buried. That was important, because if the records had been deleted, the company would have faced a very different crisis. Instead, we could recover them. But recovering them did not erase why they had been lost in the first place. At 3:40 a.m., we restored all 38 records. At 5:15 a.m., we completed a broader audit. We found 19 additional records with timing discrepancies, but no missing eligibility data. At 6:30 a.m., I sent Ridgewell a preliminary incident report. It did not make excuses. It explained the issue, the scope, the correction, the additional controls, and the verification steps we had completed. At 8:58 a.m. Saturday, Ridgewell's benefits director replied, "I appreciate the transparency and the speed of the remediation. We will review the final validation package before determining next steps. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But not termination either." At 11 a.m., I joined the final Ridgewell review call. The CEO attended. Harold did not. Bryce did not. The Ridgewell legal counsel asked detailed questions about the missing records, the workflow change, the false launch confirmation, and the access control process. I answered every one. Calmly. Factually. When they asked why the problem had not been caught earlier, I told them the truth. The validation control was bypassed during the transition to new departmental leadership. It has been restored, and any future workflow changes now require documented approval from operations, compliance, and the client team. The Ridgewell vice president listened. Then she said, "Melissa, are you back in charge of this project?" "Yes," I said. Her answer came after a short pause. "Then we are willing to proceed with a delayed launch." That sentence saved Westbridge $12 million. Not Harold. Not Bryce. The team. The people who had stayed late, followed the process, documented the problems, and did the work when the title holders could not. The launch happened 5 days later. It was not flashy. There was no giant announcement. No CEO video. No next generation of leadership email. Just a controlled transition completed with verified records, written approvals, and a detailed support plan. That was how it should have happened from the beginning. The investigation into the false email and the workflow change took 3 weeks. Harold was placed on leave while the board reviewed the findings. Bryce was removed from the director role before his 30-day review period ended. He never gained full system access. He never completed the certification. He never logged into the secure repository he had been appointed to manage. The company announced that Bryce had transitioned out of the organization. Harold resigned 2 months later. The board statement was careful. It said Westbridge was moving forward with renewed accountability and strengthened governance. Corporate language has a way of sanding down the sharp edges. But everyone inside the company knew what had happened. A CEO had given a mission-critical department to his nephew. He had ignored every warning. He had pressured staff to bypass controls. Then he had sent a client a false confirmation because he cared more about looking ready than actually being ready. And when the truth showed up in writing, there was nowhere left for him to hide. My office was returned to me the following Monday. The same desk. The same process map on the wall. The same window facing the parking lot. Bryce's coffee stain was still on one corner of the desk, and I thought about asking facilities to replace it. Then I decided to leave it. Not as a trophy. I did not need that. As a reminder. A title can be assigned in an email. Trust cannot. Competence cannot. And access to a system does not make someone qualified to lead the people who depend on it. If that hit you the way it hit me, hit subscribe. This channel is proof that being underestimated is a warning, not a weakness. Here is what I learned. When someone tries to push you aside at work, do not make your value invisible by rescuing them in secret. Help professionally where you are required to help. But document the facts. Know your rights. Know your responsibilities. Know which approvals carry your name and which policies protect you from being pressured into a bad decision. If a new manager asks you to bypass controls, put the requirement in writing. If they give a client an answer that is not true, correct the record calmly and immediately. If they remove your authority but expect your accountability, clarify the boundary in an email. Do not use emotion when facts will do more. The people who underestimate you often want you to react. They want you to look difficult, defensive, or resentful. Do not give them that story. Give them timestamps. Give them policy references. Give them a clean record showing what you knew, what you warned them about, and what they chose to do anyway. That is how you become untouchable. Not by being louder than the person with the bigger title. By being more prepared than the person who assumes the title is enough. Harold thought I was a gatekeeper. But gates exist for a reason. And when someone insists on walking around them, they should not be surprised when they end up locked out of the room. The next story began when my manager fired me for not being a team player. I had spent 5 years holding together a department everyone else was quietly trying to escape. Then they walked me out on a Tuesday afternoon, assuming the team would fall back in line by Wednesday. They did not. By Friday, 3 people had resigned. 1 client had called me directly, and my former manager finally understood what teamwork had actually been costing me. Subscribe so you don't miss what happened when the entire team quit after me.